All right, welcome everybody. Oh my goodness, I wish you'd been here early with us. We were already having some fun, some pre-Halloween fun. So if you're just joining, you can go into the chat. Mac put in a question earlier saying, hey, tell us about your favorite or best or most interesting Halloween costume from, I'm not going to just say childhood, from whenever, because we're all children at heart, hopefully. Keep a little bit of that spirit alive. I am Valerie. I'm on the board at USDLA, and it's my pleasure to once again welcome you, not join you, I'm joining you too, welcome you to a special edition. Normally we're here on Fridays, but when we have a speaker who says Tuesday, we go, yes, Tuesday. So here we are. We're so glad to have Wendy here with us today. She's going to be telling you all about online proctoring and cameras on and all of those sorts of things in just one moment. And she is here courtesy of our friend Dr. Mac Atkins from SmarterServices. I'm going to turn things over to them in just a moment, but first, couple of quick little announcements. I always feel like I have to do the infomercial, like, keep the lights on and all that stuff. But just to remind you, today's session is being recorded. Some of you right now are probably watching this from the future, and we thank you for watching the replay of this. But all of our replays, or most of our replays anyway, you can go check out at USDLA.tv. That's where we keep a lot of great content. If you haven't gone over there and subscribed, please go over there, check it out. You'll get a lot of great content over there. But some of our amazing speakers, for various reasons, asked to remain in the member archive. So if you're not already a member, here's your chance. We actually have a 60-day free trial membership. You could go in there, you could binge watch between now and like the end of the year. You could binge watch a whole bunch of stuff for free just to check things out. But hopefully you will decide to become a member. And I'm going to give you a little extra incentive for that in just a moment. That's because next week, all of next week is National Distance Learning Week. That's November 3rd through the 7th. We have free programming every day next week. We have 2 or 3 sessions most days, including sort of like we did today, sort of getting people warmed up. We have a session at the beginning of each day. It's really a networking, sort of talking, discussion, radio show kind of vibe to it. So come meet some other of your colleagues, ask your questions. We love to hear from you. We love to know what you want to hear about. The session today is one of those type of things. Most of our sessions, it's not like I just make this up. We go out and we listen to you and we say, hey, what is of concern to you? What do you really want to hear about? And then that's how we do our programming. So please let us know if there's a topic or a speaker, or maybe you are a speaker. Reach out to me or anybody at the board and we'll be happy to talk to you. So as I said, we are a member association, and so we run on the generosity of our members, sponsors, partners, all of that. So please consider joining. And as I said, I'll put a link in the chat in just one moment that right now you can get a full year's membership. An individual membership is normally $125 for the year, but in honor of National Distance Learning Week, you can get it for $99. So pretty sweet little deal there. I know. I see the shocked faces. Like, oh, that sounds good. All right. Also, last thing, I want you to save the date if you can for our national conference, which is next June. We'll be in Cleveland next year because Cleveland rocks. And we will actually have an opportunity to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's June 22nd to the 25th. So if you can make it, we would love to have you join us for that. If you can't make it and you would like to join us virtually, don't worry, we have an option for that too. We'll have at least 2 full days of programming the week prior to the on-site event. So that's the 17th and 18th. So watch for that. But very importantly, I have my friend and colleague, Harriet Watkins, with me today. And she is the one who will be going through the speaker proposal. So she would love for you to submit a speaker proposal for the conference and or submit for an award. Both of those, we have new categories, both in the awards and in the speaker categories, because again, we got a lot of great feedback the past couple of conferences, and we heard that you wanted more hands-on and you wanted more opportunity to have some structured, lightly structured networking and things like that. So we have really we have a fun sort of program in the works for you this year. Very different, not totally different, but very different in some ways than in previous years. So with that, I think that's enough of me sharing. So I am now going to stop sharing. There we go. And I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Dr. Matt Atkins and Wendy Raynor for being here with us today. They'll do additional introductions in just a moment, but I want to thank you all once again for being with us today and sharing your amazing insights. And with that, welcome, and I turn things over to you.
All righty, thank you. Just confirming you guys are seeing my screen now. Okay, super. So thank you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar on a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I'm glad that you are here for. The title is When the Camera is Watching, Helping Neurodiverse Learners Navigate Virtually Proctored Exams. A couple of housekeeping things that may not have already been covered. We will be sharing the webinar recording, the free resources, and the slide deck after the webinar concludes, so you don't even have to take notes. Just sit back and soak it all in. We do encourage you to use the chat or Q&A feature here in Zoom if you have questions. We do have staff who are monitoring those, and they may respond then, or they may hold your question to the end where we have a slide to address that. Some of our clients benefit from a certificate of participation to document their continuing education. If that's the case for you and you could benefit from a 1-hour certificate, just send an email request to certificates@SmarterServices. We'll be glad to send that out to you. Also, you'll receive a follow-up email that has lots of information. It's got a summary of the webinar. It's going to have a link to the survey. And we do ask that you fill that out because it's important to get your feedback as we plan for additional webinars during the year. So, hi, I'm Dr. Mac Adkins, the founder and chief academic officer here at SmarterServices, and I'm really excited today to be joined by Wendy Raynor. Let me tell you a little bit about Wendy. She's the founder of WRH College Prep and a learning differences specialist who's been consulting and tutoring since 2011. Drawing from her own experiences with learning challenges and anxiety, she helps students who are neurodiverse succeed in standardized testing. She authored Accommodations Simplified, a guide to understanding SAT and ACT accommodations, and supports families in securing the accommodations that their students need. And that's important work. Wendy holds a BA from the University of the Pacific and an MBA from Middlebury Institute of International Studies. She also is the Accommodations Liaison for the National Test Prep Association and serves on the board of the International Dyslexia Association of Georgia. So Wendy, we are glad that you're here. A part of what we want to achieve today is to get the conversation started about this topic. And so in the spirit of you having a conversation with your colleagues, Wendy and I decided to do this webinar, not in the typical speaker presentation format, but more in kind of an interview format. So we're going to both leave our cameras on here and we're just going to kind of have a conversation and you can benefit from that and chime in there through chat. I want to first start out with a very general question. And the reason I started with this question is that our audience today, there's a lot of USDLA people. There's a lot of SmarterServices clients and prospective clients. And both of our organizations typically serve leaders in distance learning. They may be distance learning deans. You could be distance learning staff. It could be faculty members. And while we're all passionate and well equipped to do what we do, typically persons in that role are not accommodations experts, right? There are persons at your institution in disability services offices that have that expertise, but generally those of us running our distance learning programs may not be as well versed there. So a part of what we want to do today is just kind of start at a general level to make sure we all understand that when we talk about neurodiversity, they're kind of on the same page. So Wendy, educate us a little bit. What are some common neurodiverse conditions that college students may have?
Definitely the most common one I think we can all agree on is ADHD. That's everywhere. You know, it is what it is. Pretty much, I would say about half the students probably say they have ADHD. But really, I think the one that sneaks up on us the most is the dyslexia and dyscalculia.
Mhm.
It is a lot more prevalent than it comes across. A lot of times it's sneaky, and October just happens to be Dyslexia Awareness Month. So, but it is very sneaky, and dyslexia is a neurodiversity that affects your ability to read and comprehend. So there's two different kinds of dyslexia. One is like, can you read the words? The other one is, well, yes, you can pronounce all the words, but do you actually understand them in context? And that's something that I think people don't really understand. Then dyscalculia is basically the same thing, but with math. Um, so I think those are definitely the most. And then I think one of the other things that is becoming a lot more understood and recognized, although it is not an official diagnosis under the DSM guidelines, is working memory. And a lot of times the reason why working memory goes undetected is because it kind of hides itself as ADHD up until usually 8th or 9th grade, when the kids are having to decode multiple steps and much deeper processes. So, especially in institutions of higher education, it could rear its ugly head very quickly, depending on, kind of the level of their high school education as well. But I think those are pretty much
Yeah.
the biggies.
Well, I appreciate that definition of dyslexia. And in this context of taking an exam, the purpose of an exam is to allow a person to demonstrate what they know. But when they read the prompts, when they read the questions on the exam, and they may not understand what the question is asking, I can see how that would really be difficult and certainly anxiety generating in that moment of the exam.
Yeah. And definitely anxiety is another big one right now. So I forgot about that one.
Okay. So kind of narrowing this focus down from generally talking about definitions of neurodiverse conditions, let's kind of turn the conversation a little bit toward virtually proctored exams and what's especially challenging there. And here's why I ask this question. I feel like there is a real gap in the literature that maybe this webinar is going to add a little bit to, about this specific phenomenon of neurodiverse students and virtually proctored exams. There's a lot in the literature about accommodations generally. There's a lot in the literature about, physically making those accommodations, and even, online generally making the accommodations. What I don't see as much is information in the literature about that moment of testing, and specifically that moment of testing for a virtual exam, because for many online courses, online proctoring is now commonplace, right? It happens in a lot of different ways. It could be automated proctoring where AI is watching the student. It could be live virtual proctoring where a human is watching the student. It can be a combination of that where AI is watching and then it tells the human, hey, you need to look at this. But there's different ways that it's done. But that point in time, for a student who's working through some of those challenges that you just mentioned, this context of a virtually proctored exam presents some specific challenges. So I know your expertise is more with ACT and SAT. They're typically face-to-face exams, but talk to us just about what you think about that context of neurodiversity in a virtual exam.
Yeah, so I think one of the one of the biggest issues, and it's not just with virtual proctoring, it also is with, just the online exam in general, which is definitely, when you come with the dyslexia, is really the tracking issue of reading online is definitely something that is very, very difficult. On a fundamental level, I will say probably the thing that freaks my students out the most about being proctored in a virtual setting, whether it is a person sitting on the other side or AI or whatever, is the countdown clock and when it turns red in a timed exam. And that certainly is something that is not something that a lot of, if somebody doesn't have anxiety or something, it's not something that you think about, but that's definitely something as well. Um, Also, a lot of times the students, with the dyslexia, with the processing speed, where they're just a slower test taker, there is a lot of insecurities about the fact that they read and process slower, and having AI kind of watching you,
Mhm.
that feeling of possibly being judged by AI or Proctor or something, because it is so well monitored that there is no hiding. And, to the point where if I'm working with a lot of my students and if I'm watching, because I do a lot of work with like tracking where their eyes are on the page, and to really make sure that I'm understanding the tracking issues and the visual spatial issues. And they'll get very flustered and be like, stop watching me. Like, I'm not saying anything, I'm not judging you, but that feeling is definitely an issue. And then I think the other one that is challenging with neurodiverse, especially when and I just saw a pop up that was going to be my next point, is ADHD, and then of course autism environment, and not being in a structured testing environment. Now, some of that can be mitigated if there is a testing site on campus and people are like just going and doing it like in your disability services office. But that absolute draw of the video game or the cell phone, or I'm distracted because it just started raining outside and my ADD is going crazy, like all of those kinds of things. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you for that overview. In the spirit of an exam, which we're all talking about now, I have a pop quiz for you.
for
Did that
me,
generate a little bit of anxiety?
yes.
So, for those of you listening who are distance learning leaders, do you know the importance of April the 24th, 2026? If not, you need to, because that's the deadline for ADA Title II, the new web accessibility rule. The standards are being raised, which is a good thing, right? It may require more work on the part of our institutions, but it's good work, right? Because it's making our courses, everything about our courses, including our exams, more accessible. Under this new rule, all digital content must be accessible, not just content that's requested on demand, uh, not just content that's public facing, including content that's behind a password. So that means anything that's in your LMS must be fully accessible at the WCAG 2.1 level AA. So lots of us now in distance learning are making sure that our courses and our platforms are all compatible and accessible. That's the work we're doing right now here at SmarterServices. While we regularly test all of our platforms for accessibility, we now have a third-party company that's assisting us with that to make sure that we're giving a good, objective look so that when that deadline comes on April the 24th, that all the services we provide, that your school can be confident that it is accessible. So that's a good thing that it's coming in the future. So if you're not familiar with that, ask around and become familiar about it. So, kind of wanted to bridge the gap here, Wendy, with the work that you do in helping students prepare for these large, high stakes standardized tests, SAT and ACT tests, and how the anxiety triggers that they may see there are similar to those in a virtual proctored exam. Because, I was thinking about it, and while you work with students and their families and really getting them ready for this high stakes college entrance exam, that's a point in time. But guess what might be happening just a few weeks after they take that test? They may be in their first college course, and it may have an online proctored exam. And so I'm just kind of curious about how many of the strategies and techniques that you're teaching the students for, and the accommodations for these larger tests might carry over as a good practice that you could let the students say, hey, keep this in mind once you get into school.
I think one of the biggest things is note-taking skills on how to take the information from the screen, especially when reading, and be able to parse it down onto paper in, keywords or something like that, so that to the very beginning point, a lot of kind of especially the dyslexia is you're reading it, but you're not comprehending it. Whereas if you pull out the keywords and note take, and let me tell you, 100% of my students, that's like pulling teeth. Like they just don't know how to note take in general. They don't get the note taking classes that I had way back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. But like, um, I think that is something that I work really hard on that definitely translates. And that was something that I struggled with when I was doing some online coursework, and the tests and things like that, and being able to really distill it down. Um, and the anxiety triggers, I think, are a little bit different when we're dealing with standardized tests in a college exam. Um, like you said, a standardized test, I kind of joke, the kids are putting so much pressure on it. They're like, if I don't do well on this standardized test, like I'm never leaving my parents' house. Like I'm going, I'm going to live in the basement for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a loser. Like I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Like all of these
No
kinds of
pressure,
things.
right?
Right. And so it's a bigger thing. I mean, it's whereas once they're in college, the final exams definitely have a lot more of that pressure, but they also have a lot more support leading into the test as far as preparation and note taking and having the tutoring on campus and having exposure to the platforms a lot more since it's kind of across all the classes that they're taking. So the anxiety triggers are still there. It's just, I think, a different thing. It's more about the platform. And I know we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. What you said there triggered a thought with me, and some of the research that's emerging about why college students cheat is, I think stereotypically we may think students cheat because they just did not prepare for the test, right? And it's quicker to cheat. But the research is showing that that's oftentimes not the case, that it is high performing students who are under a lot of pressure, whether that's because of their discipline, and these are very key classes to get their degree, or because of their nationality that's putting a lot of pressure on them to succeed. But these are high performing students that feel a lot of pressure to really excel on the test, right? And that then, fosters their decision to cheat.
Yeah. Oh, I can tell you 100% my students that cheat on their mock tests are high performers, not low
Yeah.
performers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is just kind of a general one, but beyond the things that we've already talked about, what are some other anxiety triggers that might appear during a virtual exam?
I mean, I've touched on a few of them. I think, their lack of being able to decode and then a question and how it's worded, and then the refusal to learn how to note take on top of it. So they're not learning a coping mechanism. I think, the countdown clock, definitely watching it. I know for me personally, that triggered my anxiety on the GMAT, like no end. Um, but to the point of any additional triggers, the content is the same when you're taking, a class exam. So I don't see additional necessarily uh, um, anxiety on top of it, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's just more about the platform because the content is the content. So I think it would be the normal level of anxiety going into it.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about this question when we put it on our kind of our interview list here. And I did a little bit of looking around at the literature, and here are some other things that they suggested that could be triggers. One is cognitive load and distraction, that this constant webcam and microphone monitoring. Now I look up at my webcam, there's a flashing green light. That can be anxiety
Overload.
triggering, right?
Absolutely.
Sensory overload from notifications or being visibly recorded. Then there's just, there may be an accommodation where there's assistive devices or some accommodation that's configured in the LMS and the testing platform, and maybe that doesn't work right, and that generates anxiety. It's a trigger as well. Let's see what else is. Oh, automated alerts for normal movements, such as eye shifts, could cause lack of focus or panic. And there are many things that neurodiverse persons may do, fidgeting, looking away, stimming,
Tourette's,
that
yes.
AI could throw a flag on for cheating. And maybe this is not the first test they've taken. Maybe this is test number 2, and in test number 1 they got really flagged because of those activities that are normal for them, but AI did not consider it normal. Just the executive processing skills that are required in onboarding for a virtual exam, right? There's lots of things you've got to do with the room scan and showing your ID and all of those steps that, for some persons, that order of operations is very difficult. So as
Yep.
we're, preparing our processes and our instructions and our student support, I think it's really important that we keep this population of learners who are neurodiverse truly in mind.
Yep. And it's definitely, I will say, the lead up. That is something that's very similar between the two, because if you are going to take an SAT, you have to download Blue Book, you've got to run a scan before you even walk in, you've got to blah, blah, blah. And then the ACT, there's also an added element of they're on the school's Wi-Fi. So if the Wi-Fi isn't working correctly, they can't take the test. One of my students was delayed 3 hours in September because of just a Wi-Fi issue, and her score reflected that.
Yeah, and that's when you get all geared up and you're doing what you can to control the anxiety, and then you're delayed for 2 hours. That's brutal, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about accommodations. There are typical kinds of accommodations. You may want to kind of review those, and specifically with the view of how can we adapt those for a virtually proctored exam.
Yeah. Obviously, the most common one is extended time, which is a pretty basic, the timer is going to get set for a longer period of time. When we start bringing in the larger accommodations, things like, well, actually, let me back up. I think other accommodations that are pretty basic that are handled very well by pretty much every virtual testing platform is, making sure that you have the line, um, whatever you call it on the different tests, like the blackout line thing, your tracker, you've got your highlighting tools, you have all of those kinds of things, you have your ability um, to blow up the text or blow up all that stuff. Like those are all normal things that are, and that are available to everyone, for the most part. Where we get tricky is in order to help like our dyslexics that have a hard time reading and decoding. Now you've started really bringing in AI readers. You're now bringing in all of these different things. And I will say, amongst most of my students, they hate AI readers.
Mm.
They hate it. They do not like the robotic voice and how they read the text. And when you combine somebody who needs a reader, dyslexia, and highly distractible, what do
Mm.
you think they're going to think about? What the AI reader is saying, or the fact that the robotic voice is annoying the crap out of them? So that is definitely something so adapted. So that's a toughie. I mean, that's a real tough one to overcome. And I don't know if anyone's really figured out a perfect magic wand to solve that. Maybe Morgan Freeman should be our like AI for everyone.
That's
Uh, so other normal ones that I think um which actually is kind of I know that one of like the next questions. One of the things that is going to be difficult is, unlimited uh, breaks through
Mhm.
that. Just because how are you going to have your virtual proctor know that the child or your student isn't going to the bathroom and like reading the textbook
Mm.
or any of those kinds of things. Um, but I think some of the other most common ones, I really think that most of the time, short of being able to somehow come up with a paper test and all of that, are really well taken care of in the virtual environment, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, your comments there prompted a couple of thoughts. I know that extended time is one of the most common accommodations. And especially when you're doing a live virtual proctored exam, that's expensive. And it's typically sold by the hour, maybe even in half-hour increments. And I know a lot of people on this call today are smarter proctoring clients or maybe prospective clients. And something that we do there is that the student is only billed for the amount of time that the test is listed for, right? So if it's a 1 hour exam and they're allowed 2 hours, we only bill for that 1 hour. We're not going to penalize the student or the institution, whether it's student pay or institution pay, for making that accommodation, because certainly the accommodation is the right thing to do. And another thing that we do and we encourage, especially for neurodiverse students, who this whole platform, this experience of virtual proctoring is so anxiety producing, is to take a practice exam. You do, especially this is important for their first exam, right? See what this environment is like. One, just to make sure that you can set up your technology correctly, but then how are you going to feel about it? Because, being in that new environment for the first time just doesn't present the right situation for a student to demonstrate what they know. So we don't charge for those practice exams. And another thing, of course, our platform is very accessible, but something we're working on right now is what we call global accommodations, where currently accommodations are configured at the exam level, right? And so that the Disability Services Office or the e-learning office or the faculty member, whoever's the right person in that workflow, configures that accommodation for the student, right? And so let's say that they're using an assistive device like a talking calculator, then the exam needs to be configured so that that voice is not, a flag that the AI is going to catch, right? Currently, that's got to be, configured for each exam. But this learner may need that accommodation across all of their exams. And so those accommodations will be configurable at the learner level so that they follow that student, for all of their exams. And so that's just something I think software is getting better. You alluded to the robotic voice. You got to think, things are getting better, and maybe it will be Morgan Freeman level someday. But I think our awareness of all these issues is certainly helping. And this is kind of a segue into this next question about, the medical accommodations that you alluded to, unlimited breaks in a virtual setting. Any other thoughts there? I know we've already kind of spoken to this a little bit.
I mean, I honestly think this is probably the most difficult accommodation in a virtual proctoring environment. You also have, HIPAA things to think about.
Yeah,
You can't have somebody being virtually proctored and watched giving themselves a shot.
yeah,
There is so much more. And so, from a security standpoint, they can't, they have every right not to be on screen and go to a secure location that's outside of their reaches. But then, from a security standpoint, you're trusting that they're actually tending to their medical needs. So I don't have a good answer for this one. I really honestly, I mean, this is one of those instances where it probably is best suited to have the student take it in person with on site, so that for those security reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for that reason that one of the great things about smarter proctoring that you guys that use it know that in addition to the student being able to schedule for automated proctoring or live virtual proctoring, right there in the same interface, we've got a nationwide database of hundreds of physical testing locations that based on the student zip code, that it shows them where there are testing locations. We integrate with the scheduling software at those testing centers. So we make it really easy, especially for these students that have executive processing difficulties. They don't need to have to jump from one platform to another platform to schedule or complicated things like having to call the test center. So we make that integrated nationwide database of face-to-face testing centers is a part of our product, right? And that's kind of unique. A lot of the virtual proctoring companies are virtual proctoring companies, but we actually started back in 2008 when we registered testproctors.com. That was our heritage, was a database of physical testing centers. So that's one of the things that we offer for situations like this that you said, Wendy, that there's some cases that virtual proctoring just may not be the best choice for this learner. And in that case, they need to have options such as face-to-face. I jumped ahead to this one about extended time sessions costing more. We've already spoke to that. What we do at Smarter Proctoring is we don't charge you for it. There may be other proctoring providers that do. I would just say this is something that you as a distance learning leader may need to have a conversation with your school about. Is how do we handle this? Are you in a student pay model? Are you in an institution pay model? And are there, billing practices that need to be equitable so that there's not an additional financial burden on a person just because of a accommodated need that they have? Um, yeah, so kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier about these screen readers, and something that we have embedded into Smarter Proctoring is an on-screen calculator, because I was just reading today that there's a certain type of scientific calculator, and it takes a little doing to make it happen. But there was one institution where someone in their engineering department had made this work, but a scientific calculator would actually connect online to ChatGPT, and they were using the calculator to access ChatGPT. So it's kind of that spy versus spy. Students that really want to find a way to cheat kind of will, but to circumvent that for most students, instead of them using a physical calculator that's their own property that they may have answers to questions coded into in some way, we offer an on-screen calculator that they can use that's a part of the software. Now, where this intersects with this conversation is, again, for a student who's neurodiverse, they need to practice that. So we make that on-screen calculator available to the student outside of the exam. I think there's like 4 or 5 different types of calculators. There's scientific calculators and graphing calculators. They need to figure out what kind of calculator is associated with this test and practice with it. And that familiarity will maybe help reduce, some of that anxiety. Does this question prompt some other thoughts from you, Wendy?
I mean, I think 100% of kids right now are so used to using Desmos that, using the online is just secondary. Although now some school districts have started using the Windows one, which is terrible, and then asking the kids to go back and forth from the calculators, to your point, like can really cause some issues. And so really making sure, I think, from like a perspective of in classroom and taking the test, that the teachers, professors understand what kind of tests are available in the virtual platforms, and making sure that they are also not requiring that the students use Desmos when the testing platform is going to be using the Windows based system or whatever. And it really is important, um, to, and again, like all of the standardized testing platforms are using the same thing, and the kids are really, really familiar with it. So throwing that at them, if you have dyscalculia and now you have to worry about which number goes in first and where the buttons are, that can cause some major
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
So practice, but I think at a school level and an administrative level, really making sure that partnership with the teachers that use calculators in their class to make sure that there is some sort of standard is really important.
Yep. So let's kind of bring it down to some personal strategies that if you're coaching a student, maybe of course in your context, you're coaching them for those large standardized tests, but they'll soon be taking subject matter tests in their classes. What strategies would you suggest to help them manage their anxiety and perform well on the test?
I think to your point, familiarity with the platform is definitely the most important. They shouldn't be getting anxiety because they don't know where, the highlighting tool is or the elimination tool is. So right there is a really big one. Um, I also work with the students on micro breaks. So not, they can't get up and leave, right? They have to sit there. Very few students get unlimited untimed breaks. But you can still take a break by putting your pencil down, pushing your mouse and keyboard away, closing your eyes, counting to 10. And a lot of students feel like 10 seconds or 5 seconds is too much. And so it's working with them on really kind of understanding what time really
There's
like. So really, really understanding what 5 seconds really is. It's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like a long time when you're just slowing yourself down. I also, with my highly, highly anxious students, I work a lot on visualization techniques, on just being able to kind of take the angry green monster. So it could be the testing platform, or it could be the class. It could be the professor, like who knows, right? And how to kind of really de-escalate it by giving it a funny name, or really kind of doing some other things. And then I think what just in general with anxiety is a lot of, again, going back to dyslexia, um making sure that they understand that, like, sometimes, especially when we're dealing with like our biology classes or something like that that have like a lot more complex vocabulary, sometimes we can just make up funny names for those really big words and not have to spend a ton of time trying to decode and read it. So it's kind of almost making it a game as well, and really kind of making it a little bit funnier.
Yeah, when you mentioned that de-escalation strategy, one that prompted me to think about one. An exam that we've sold in the past is called the Test Anxiety Scale, and it helps a student understand their level of anxiety in comparison to the general population, right? And then after it is a coaching tool. It's like a 3-minute audio tool, and there's pleasant music playing in the background. But what the narrator does in that tool is he talks the student through the process where they don't perceive the exam is a time in which they're being judged, that this is a performance that you've got to do, but rather see the exam as an opportunity to demonstrate what you know. That to think about all the study, all the preparation that you've put into it, think, I know this stuff, and I'm excited about the opportunity to show what I know. And just that mental de-escalation strategy of trying to shift from that negative, scary thoughts that are racing through your mind before the test to a positive, optimistic, I'm going to show what I know approach. For some learners that could make a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other practical suggestions about how students can prepare for virtually proctored exams? We're talking about practice sessions and checking their technology. Meet the Proctors one I put there because at some of our institutions, they use a modality of proctoring that we offer called hybrid virtual proctoring. And it's hybrid in that it is live virtual proctoring. There is someone watching you, but the person watching you is not a stranger that you don't know. It's someone at your institution. Typically, these are people in the institution's testing center. It could be a staff person of the accessibility, services office, but it's someone from the school that's going to be the proctor. And in that case, if it's a person associated with the school, there may be an opportunity to meet the person that's going to be proctoring. And there's something about not being observed by a stranger that's a little less comforting. So, what other thoughts have crossed your mind there?
I definitely really like a consistent proctor if there is
Mhm.
live is, you get comfortable with their way of doing things, their behaviors, you know, they're not worried if the proctor is just constantly staring ahead, they're not worried, right? All of our mannerisms and things like that. So, um, I really like that when you do have someone on the screen like watching. I think it's a good thing. I also think really encouraging the students in that situation to ask questions and have a conversation and don't just kind of get down to business, start the test right now, but have somebody introduce and all of those things.
Right.
But really, at the end of the day, it's understanding the platforms. And, for me, one of the most annoying things about the digital ACT is that there are three, or were, they've now brought it down to two, but there are two different digital platforms that they push the test out. And one is for your state mandated testing and your school day testing, and the other is for national testing. So if you have a student that is in, so I'm in Atlanta, so Fulton County, the digital test takers that take it on the school day on Wednesday is totally different. The platform is completely different than when they take it the Saturday prior.
Wow.
And so you really have to, now thankfully there's hidden, you can find this school day testing one, but it really takes a lot of time.
Mm.
It really takes a lot of time. And so consistency. And so for, the administrators really trying to avoid having like 16 different platforms that the kids are taking tests on, I think is really important.
Yeah, so familiarity with the platform and if possible, familiarity with the proctor, if it's an institution provided proctor. We've already talked about this, especially in the case of medical issues, if the person's, giving themselves a shot. Any other cases other than medical issues that a neurodiverse learner, they might be a better choice for them to go to a face-to-face environment?
Well, I mean, obviously, if they have to take a paper test for tracking visual, spatial, things like that, your dyslexics, things, that really can't track in an online environment. That is me. I will fully say that when I take or a paper SAT and then move to the digital on the ELA side, my score drops 100 to 150 points, moving
Wow.
from, yeah, it's significant because of my tracking issues with dyslexia. So, it really is impactful, and people don't really believe me because they're like, you take tests for a living. I'm like, yes. And so for me, I take standardized tests for a living, and I just got off the banned list for ACT, so I get to actually go in and take it with the kids again. I'm very excited. But if it's happening to me, just imagine what it's happening to those
Wow.
students. And are you really getting an accurate representation in all cases? Online
Right.
is great for most cases, but for all, it really can be impactful. So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. And then, again, we were kind of talking about really bringing in if you're highly distractible, any of those kinds of things when you start bringing in, super severe ADHD or, um, you know, things like that. And on the flip side, though, there are times that the virtual would or bringing into a non-virtual environment would be really probably not a good thing. Like if you have a student with pretty severe Tourette's and could be highly distractible to everyone else in the testing center, that would be something that I would question.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And we've likely got some faculty on this webinar, and maybe you've got them thinking about some things that maybe increasing their level of compassion for learners that are struggling with these things. And maybe something practical faculty could do is, and your institution may have standardized wording about this already, but making sure that it's in your syllabus to educate the students about there are options, that there are accommodations that can be made. There may be testing, platform options, face-to-face options, and just increasing awareness among the students, because it would be tragic for a learner to be that disadvantaged, and like you said, significantly scoring lower on the test just because there was something about the testing environment that was not the best fit. So maybe this will create some of those conversations. We're getting close to the end here. We just got one or two more questions. And that's really that closing comment was kind of speaking to this one about what can institutions and instructors do to make their virtually proctored exams more equitable and accessible. And it's those ideas like making sure in your syllabus that we're educating students about these choices. What other thoughts do you have?
It goes back to, I mean, like you were saying, ADA, there's so much going on right now in order to make everything more accessible, and that is going to kind of level the playing field a little bit about kind of making things accessible across the board and standardized. But really, it's just taking into account things like cost. When we are talking about neurodiverse students, the costs involved with them just getting diagnosed is astronomical, because most families don't qualify to get the testing in for free through their school districts when they're in high school. So likely those families have spent $5,000 to $10,000 to get diagnosed in the first place. I mean, even UGA here, yes, you can get tested through the psychology department, but it's still $900, and it's last time I checked, it was an 8-month waiting list.
Wow.
So pushing pushing the fee onto these students and families that have already invested so much. And then you think about it, medication on top of it, and therapy, and you've got your reading interventionalists and all of that they've gone through to get to the point to be at your institutions. Like, you're supporting them there, but the parents are already knee deep. So, and of course there's exceptions where you've got like Auburn Skill or University of Arizona Salt that like they pay additional tuition for all that support. So I understand that, but just be aware if you're pushing the costs onto the student. I think that is definitely something that we don't think about a lot.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that concern. So, talking about resources here as we're wrapping up, I've listed a few here. The first two are things that we've created as takeaways just from this webinar. That first link there is a downloadable resource. It's a front and back page that really is kind of a summary of these questions and the things we've talked about today. The purpose of this document is something that you could use with your faculty as you're doing professional development to increase awareness among your faculty about these issues so that they can take the proper steps, they can have the proper compassion, they can be understanding about all the services that the institution offers to make sure that learners that need these services get them. So that's a 2-page document, the first link there that you can use with faculty training. The second one is a video. I know many of you on the webinar are our Smarter Proctoring clients, and this video is specifically something you can embed into your syllabus or your instructions for your test. But it's a little about a 2-minute video that has several of the suggestions that we've talked about today, but in a video that the student could watch at some point as they're preparing for their exam, right? So hopefully that might be something useful. The third link there is to Wendy's book that she's published about. Wendy, you want to say something about your book there?
It's the only guide available on walking you through how to get accommodations on standardized tests. And we also have to remember that any certifying exam, so whether it be the welding exam or a nursing certification exam, not anything is covered under Section 309 of the ADA, and you are required by law to execute those to the best of your ability with the accommodations. And so it is something to be very aware of if you are using some of the platforms for those. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I walk through everything, every pitfall, every parent question I've ever had.
Sounds interesting. The next two
It's
are
a short read. It's fine.
just kind of official things that you can go to. The ADA's, official language there about technical assistance and testing accommodations. The next one there is from the College Board. And then the last one is UC Berkeley. They've done a great job on this page with language that if you're looking to improve the processes and the verbiage and the terminology that you're making student facing about all of this, go to that link from UC Berkeley. They've done a great job of putting that in writing, and you might be able to benefit from that, some of that. So in closing, Wendy, what's a closing message that you'd just like to say to institutions about supporting neurodiverse learners in virtual exams?
I just be flexible. I think out of the box sometimes and realize that, we're not dealing with every single student. The ones that most of them are well served by the time and a half accommodation, but really start thinking outside the box for those medical accommodations, or really ask the question, is the student really showing the skill level that they have because we're forcing a virtual exam? Like, is this one of the rare occasions that we should look at paper? So, but just think out of the box a little bit and have contingency plans.
Okay, very good. In the slide deck that you'll receive, here's just a brief summary about the three organizations that have brought this to you today. I've mentioned several times Smarter Proctoring, which is our proctoring platform. If your school is looking to improve its processes, we encourage you to take a look at Smarter Proctoring. We offer 7 different proctoring modalities, right? That's more than any other proctoring provider. So check us out if you're looking to improve your proctoring. I'll pass it to my colleague, Carol. We've got 3 minutes there. I've been so engaged in this dialogue with Wendy, I haven't even looked at chat. Carol, are there any questions that we've not spoken to?
No, I think I had a question of if neurodivergent learners were involved in the creation of Smarter Proctoring. And I said, no, they weren't consulted in the development of the platform, but just from the popularity of face-to-face options being provided for remote learners, that we feel confident that they appreciate having options and not being forced down one path. But I answered that in the chat, and I think that was pretty much it when it comes to questions.
Okay. Well, very much. We will give you 2 minutes back on your calendar today. So thank you for joining us for this topic, this conversation. I'm really passionate about it because there are many learners out there that just are not being allowed to demonstrate what they know. They really know it, but this testing environment triggers them in so many ways. And so we need to do the best that we can with our policies, with our practices, with our platforms to allow these students to truly get the credit they deserve for what they know. So thank you for joining us today. Be looking for our follow-up email. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.